Well, this is the last week for some people. I know the playoffs start next week, and some of y'all may or may not be cooked. But I know there's another portion that needs to win this week. And you have the Ravens, the Pats, the Commanders, the Colts. You have so many different teams on bye. So it's going to be tough. We're going to go through. We're going to answer questions as always. And of course, just in case you don't know, we always answer questions every single night that are submitted over there on flogfantasy.com. If you ever wanted to get in a question for one of these live streams, obviously you can ask it when we're live. You can ask it before, after, whenever you want, because when we answer it on the live stream, it is automatically sent to you through the site with the exact timestamp where you just click the link and it takes you to your question getting answered. Just hit the personal advice button over there on flogfantasy.com. Then you can send in a super message, a start sit question, a trade question, or get a full-blown team review, whatever you are wanting. But let's go ahead and let's dive into our first question. Coming out from Andy. Says, hey Mason, crucial week. Are we going to go with Dowdle or Pacheco? And then Juwan Jennings versus Adam Thielen. I could also play 3 of the 4 via the flex. Okay, so here looking at the flex spot, I think that, yeah, you probably end up just having to play both. You know what, actually, yeah, Brian Robinson. No, Brian Robinson on bye. Never mind, I'm an idiot. Here, I think you definitely play Trey McBride over somebody like Adam Thielen. So I'm going to have a little bit of a hot take here, but while 100% I agree that if you're looking at Thielen, this is a receiver that is playing with a quarterback that's improved dramatically over the past 2 weeks. Like the past 2 weeks have been the best 2 weeks that we have seen ever from Bryce Young in his NFL career. And that has a lot of people really excited about Adam Thielen coming off a 20-point performance. However, if you actually look at what sportsbooks are projecting out at this point, you have sportsbooks projecting the Carolina Panthers to be the lowest scoring offense in the NFL this week. The spread in this game against Philadelphia is like 13.5 points. You take a step backwards and look at the larger sample where, yes, Bryce Young's looked good over the past 2 weeks, but we've had about 20 games of Bryce Young looking like an absolute train wreck. So I'm going to have the hot take, the hard stance, whatever the hell you want to call it this week, that you should not be starting Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen is a player that you need a bench. Going through and looking at Juwan Jennings versus Adam Thielen, I would prefer Jennings over Thielen. Now, with that being said, I personally would be actually probably playing both running backs. Dowdle has a very good matchup. Dowdle's had back-to-back games with 20-plus opportunities. I do expect that Dowdle regresses here under the assumption that Dallas loses this game where they are 4.5-point dogs. And obviously over the past 2 weeks, they've won, which has really boosted up what you've had from Rico Dowdle and his overall workload in the second half. I do want to play Dowdle. I probably want to play Pacheco as well. Pacheco clearly wasn't ready last week. Horrible call on my end saying to start him. But I don't know. You get another 9 days. I'd assume that Pacheco expands the role. Tough matchup against the Chargers. But for me, I would rather have Pacheco going over Jennings. So Jennings over Thielen, but I would still want to get Pacheco in the flex spot. I know that was a lot just to tell you to start Pacheco in the flex, but appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out there, my guy. But K-Dirt somehow not through the trade deadline yet. Coming through says must win for the playoffs. Gamble by sitting Nico for Waddle, or should we go get Higgins? And then Mike Evans was also offered. So Tank Dell is effectively a 0 at this point. So if you're looking at this trade, for anybody that's wondering, of course, Nico Collins is significantly better than T. Higgins rest of season. But if you have to win to get into the fantasy playoffs and you're dealing with the Nico Collins bye, you are for sure getting an upgrade from Waddle to T. Higgins. So for me, it's tough. Like if you could go sell Nico and get Higgins and Mike Evans, 100%, you go ahead and you make that play. However, if it's just getting effectively T. Higgins straight up for Nico Collins, I think you're still probably giving up a little bit too much value. I think you go with Nico. Mason says, how are the underdog teams looking? Absolutely absurd. I know there's that database where you can look up like the public record of how many Best Ball Mania teams each user is advancing. My name on Underdog's Fantasy Flock, you can look it up. Last I checked, I think we are advancing like 40 Best Ball Mania teams. Our Underdog teams, this year we freaking crushed it. Not only is my team in the Flock League looking like we're going to get a bye for week 1, but it looks like we may actually win a considerable amount on Underdog. I don't typically get like super excited about the best ball teams though until we are actually in the playoff tournaments and we know exactly what we should be rooting for. But the Soaring Eagle, always happy to see you. Here we need to start a wide receiver. We have no downs on bye. I think you go Jameson over Nick Westbrook-Ikhine and Romeo Doubs, even if Doubs plays. Going over to tight end, pretty easy call to play David Njoku. Tough matchup going up against the Steelers, though. And then down here in the flex, gross. Realistically, I don't know what to do, if I'm just going to be completely honest with you. No way in hell I can start ETN. I'd rather not start Jalen Warren. Josh Downs isn't going to play. Maybe I tell you to go Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Super unsustainable touchdown rate. Like, I want to be on record. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is a trap. This is going to end poorly. Now, it's a good matchup this week going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, I wouldn't fault anybody for being maybe bullish on this offense, bullish on Nick in general. But if the touchdown rate's coming down, I don't know if you can be super excited about it. And honestly, I think you could look at a tight end if you potentially wanted to flex a tight end there. But now, Glow Gang coming through with a massive dono. My guy, thank you so much. Really appreciate this. Excited to check it out. Let me hook you up with a couple free start set questions. Usually, whenever anybody gets a team review, we send them over a free trade question and a free start set question. I'm assuming your trade deadline is already passed, so I'm just going to hook you up with a couple free start sets. That way you can get some help during the fantasy playoffs. Asking who we should start this week and also going into the future. Love the content as well. Thank you, my guy. Really appreciate you. Looking at this, we have by far and away the #1 team in the league analyzer. And before we even pull it up, I just want to prep everybody for this. This team is going to be obnoxious. This team is going to be insane. This is an 8-team league where you start 2 receivers and 1 flex. And if you look at what we have down here with 41,000 value points, and we need to come up with a decent term for them, you already know that this team's going to be insane. So going through and pulling this up, this week, obviously, we are going to have to pick up a streaming quarterback. Let's get through our waiver wire moves first, and then we'll talk about the starting lineup. A streaming quarterback, I think it's probably a pretty easy call to say, oh, just cut either Calvin Ridley or Darnell Mooney, and we're going to pick up Tua. Pretty easy call on that front. Pick up Tua, play him for Lamar during the bye, and then we're going to turn around, and after you get through the bye week for Lamar Jackson, then obviously you can cut Tua for an exciting pickup at running back. Going through and looking at potential running back additions, the main guy that you'd be looking at here would be Isaac Guerendo. I would not drop any of the running backs that we currently have on this roster for him, however. Going over and looking at what we have at wide receiver, for me, I would prefer having Jerry Jeudy over Darnell Mooney and Calvin Ridley. So I think plan A, obviously, is go through and pick up another quarterback by dropping one of Mooney or one of Ridley. Go get Tua for this week. And then I would also drop the other wide receiver for us to be able to go ahead and upgrade with, to get Tua for this week. And then we're going to upgrade with Jeudy in the long term. And then looking at what we have at tight end, obviously we're chilling. We have the elite tight end with McBride. And then after we make those moves, the starting lineup that we should assume we are submitting every week involves the 3 bell cow running backs inside our starting lineup every single week. And I don't want to say Gibbs the bell cow. Obviously, he's not. The 3 elite running backs, how about that? We're going to be starting Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Chase Brown every single week. You put them at RB1, RB2. You put Chase Brown down there in the flex. Really, the only way that this changes is if we see another running back here in Cincinnati begin to get some run where it's not Chase Brown seeing 90+% of the opportunities. But how things sit right now, Chase Brown is a running back that's in one of the league's best offenses, that's seeing 90+% of the running back opportunities every week, including usage as a receiver. And then obviously Gibbs in the best offense in the league, Bijan a true bell cow. So yeah, you're just starting Bijan, Gibbs, Chase Brown every week at running back in the flex. Wide receiver, you go through and you play A.J. Brown and then go back and forth between Puka and Evans based off matchup. If you wanted to go with Evans this week with Puka having a tough spot against the Bills, I wouldn't fault you for it. I think we have them ranked back-to-back in our rankings as it stands right now, but it will be something that we update later in the week. And then again, obviously, if your trade deadline has not passed, while it's very difficult to ever make a move in an 8-team league, especially when you are this loaded, obviously the main thing that we would be looking at is just trying to go ahead and sell any depth pieces that we have for upgrades inside the starting lineup. So, I mean, if you could potentially take a wide receiver like, I don't know, Devonta Smith and tier up by selling him and Mike Evans to get to maybe a borderline top 5 name such as Justin Jefferson. Obviously, we do it in an 8-team league. It's just much easier said than done. But I wish I had more for you, my guy. Let me hook you up. We're going to get you another free start set question. You should have 3 free start set questions. So every week, feel free to send me a start set question on the site for free during the playoffs. But yeah, for this week, I think we're going to go Bijan, Gibbs, Chase Brown, running back in the flexes, and then A.J. Brown, flip a coin between Puka and Evans. I wouldn't fault you whatsoever if you decided you wanted to go through and play Evans this week, knowing Puka's in a bit of a tougher matchup against the Bills. But let's move this over to LB727. Says, heading into the fantasy playoffs, ranked number 5 right now out of 12. I have a free agent bid of Garindo and would be dropping Gesicki if we get him. Any starter suggestions and lineup comments would be amazing. Really appreciate you, my guy. And I will say quickly, let me just double check and make sure with the league settings here. But yeah, this is definitely a little bit of a shallower roster. We have Vidal down here on the bench. We are looking to drop Gesicki. So just to be on the same page, when you're saying that you are putting in a bid for Isaac Garindo here, you are unloading the clip. Whatever you have left, you spend. If you have $65 left and there's somebody else in your league that has 85, you bid all 60. If you wanted to hold back 2 or 3 to potentially make pickups during the playoffs, you can. But especially looking at this team, like, hell, I'd throw Garindo in right away over Rachaad White. So I think he is somebody that would help pretty much immediately. I think you should be very aggressive with that. Now, starting off at quarterback, we are effectively just streaming this week Matthew Stafford. We have Jaden Daniels down here on the bench. For me, I don't know if anybody in my league's watching this, so I kind of got to be a little careful. I'm dropping Stafford this week, hopefully to pick up a streaming quarterback. I think it's a tough matchup for Stafford going up against Buffalo. Obviously, you can make an argument that they are going to have to throw the ball a bunch, but still. So if you wanted to potentially move on from Stafford and look at a different quarterback off the waiver wire for this week when we had Daniels on the bye, I wouldn't fault you for it whatsoever. But of course, again, with that being said, this is a spot where we are starting Daniels every single week once he is back from his bye week. Going over to running back, we have the RB1 breakout with Bucky Irving. Bucky in a great matchup this week. I actually have ranked as RB10. Really should be a phenomenal spot. Going over and looking at Rachaad White, this is a running back that you kind of need to replace immediately. We have Taylor on bye, so going with Taylor and Bucky at running back should be fine going into the future. But picking up Garindo, he should still actually play in your flex spot here. Going through and looking at what we have at wide receiver, we have Devontae Adams, A.J. Brown. So we have a locked and loaded wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. David Njoku strong tight ends. For sure, you're dropping Mike Gesicki with Njoku already through the bye. I personally would probably throw Jaden Reed into the flex spot over Ridley. if Romeo Doubs does not play. If Doubs does play, obviously you do you. Calvin Ridley's definitely in the better matchup between the two, but Jaden Reed's in a pretty good spot as well because they are just going to air the ball out against Detroit. So in terms of looking at this roster, the main thing is we really need just an additional starter. I think going through and picking up somebody like Isaac Grindo would just be a complete 180 for this team, where you would really be looking at a strength there at the running back position, having the starter in San Francisco as your running back 3. One thing that's worth pointing out as well is when we're looking at the bench down here below, it's a spot where some of these names I would actually be fine letting go and rostering a second defense. Like, for example, this week, you have a pretty tough matchup for the Lions DST having to go up against the Packers. But obviously, you don't necessarily want to go through and drop the Lions defense, knowing that, I don't know, they're just a great option to have, particularly in the playoffs. But what I'm planning on doing with my own team going forward, especially knowing starting week 15, we're done with all the buys, is I am going to be rostering 2 defenses. That way I can just play the matchups from a week-to-week perspective. So if you wanted to go ahead and drop a running back like Vidal, where in reality, what's the probability that this guy actually hits your starting lineup in a running back by committee? I don't exactly know. I wouldn't fault you if you wanted to move on from him, pick up a more appealing defensive streaming team this week, play them over the Lions, and then go back and forth with the matchups once you get to the fantasy playoffs. I think that would be appealing. I think picking up Isaac Grindo, playing him immediately over Rashad White would be appealing. I would consider flipping Jaden Reed and Calvin Ridley there at wide receiver, depending on what we have with Romeo Doubs. And then again, if you are looking at Buffalo, they are seconds against in quarterback points this year. So I would go through and I would look to stream a different quarterback instead of Matthew Stafford. But let me hook you up with a free start sit question, my guy, just in case you have anything else that you want to follow up with here. Obviously, I'm assuming that you're in a spot where your trade deadline has already passed. And really the only thing we're looking at is waiver wire moves and start sets. Now, JPAC says Stafford versus Winston versus Caleb for the week 14 quarterback. So Stafford, tough matchup going up against Buffalo. Winston, tough matchup going up against Pitt. And Caleb usually would be a very tough matchup going up against the Niners. But obviously the Niners are a little bit different now than what they were previously. I wouldn't fault you whatsoever for going with either Stafford or Winston. I know Caleb's averaged about 300 passing yards per game over the past 2 weeks. I think it's a tough spot to play Caleb, however, knowing that this is just a completely new coaching staff where we really don't know what we should be expecting here. That may slow the game down. You may see them be a little bit more neutral as an offense. I just have no freaking idea. I'd rather sit this one out and not play Caleb against the Niners. For me, oh dear God. Do you have to play Winston? It's between Stafford and Winston. I feel like you may end up having to go Jameis. You do have the, actually, it's probably a trap game. You have the spread on this game at like 6.5 points. You have the Browns projected as a bottom 3 offense according to sportsbooks. Main thing I'm just worried about, of course, is you also have the tough matchup, not only for Jameis, but also for Stafford. Can everybody spam the chat? Are you going to be going with Stafford against the Bills? Or are you going to go with Jameis against the Steelers? Please let me know in the live chat. Again, sportsbooks are projecting out the Cleveland Browns to be a bottom 3 offense in total points scored this week. We got Jameis, Stafford, Caleb, Jameis, Stafford. So it looks like you have people slightly more on Stafford than Winston. Frankly, I don't know. I think you flip a coin between the two. I want to play Caleb. I'd probably go Stafford, but again, I mean, it's just tough with Jameis having the recent points. Like, you got to give the man his credit. Now, Jeremy coming through. Quarterback, we are looking at Matthew Stafford as somebody that I guess we're playing here over Daniels. Again, I have Stafford on my team. I've started Stafford, I want to say back-to-back weeks at this point, but I am personally looking to drop Stafford to stream somebody else. I do not like the matchup here. Obviously, it's been much better with Puka and Kupp back in, though. Wide receiver, we have no Nico. Oh, you think you have to play Wilson and just continue to roll with the targets? I think you go Jaden Reed and hope that the efficiency carries him through. And then running back, we're going to go with Kenneth Walker and Rico Dowdle. I know a lot of people would want to get Jennings in over one of the receivers, though. But I mean, definitely for the flex, please play both running backs. If this was my lineup, this is how I'd submit it. Now, Tex Radar coming through with our next question says, my beef for the weird format, flex is best on waivers. My playoffs are weeks 16 through 17. Is it worth losing the handcuff? Okay, so I don't know exactly what we're asking here. So are you asking if we should be dropping any of the players in this starting lineup to pick up a either Garindo or Adam Thielen? I want to say, and I want to be on record here, that Isaac Garindo is infinitely more appealing than Adam Thielen. Again, we should expect to have some serious regression here in this Carolina Panthers offense. Sportsbooks are projecting out the Panthers to be the worst offense in the NFL this week. We've had 20 games through Bryce Young's NFL career with him looking atrocious. You've had 2 games over the past 2 weeks where he's looked good. I think you go with the larger sample over the shorter one. Going ahead and looking at what we have with Isaac Garindo, while, yeah, the offense is much worse than a typical Niners offense, still, you really don't have any competition at this point. So I have them definitely light years ahead of Adam Thielen in terms of waiver wire priority at the moment. And yes, it would be worth dropping Tyler Algier. It'd be worth losing the handcuff to Bijan. Another thing you could do is, if this is a one quarterback format, drop CJ Stroud. We haven't had a game with 20 fantasy points from CJ Stroud since September. So if you are rostering 3 QBs, drop Stroud, pick up Garindo. If it's a super flex league, obviously ignore me. Or if maybe we're not rostering those 3 and you're really just asking, should we drop Tyler Algier for Isaac Garindo, then yes, I would. And in terms of who would be looking to, I'm not even going to answer this as a start set. I don't know exactly what you want. I'm going to hook you up with a free start set question, my guy. That way, in case you wanted me to submit a start set, send in another one, especially that way I know the format here as well. But maybe we can play around with this and go, yeah, please pick up Garindo, drop Algier. Now, Webb's coming through with a massive dono. Let me refresh this real quick. And let me hook you up with a bunch of free start set questions, my guy. I'm going to assume that you are all through trades at this point in week 14. I just hooked you up with 3 free start set questions. So feel free to send me a start set every single a week in the fantasy playoffs. This is a 2 quarterback 10-team league. Tush Push Merchants. We are the 2nd team in the league analyzer. We are currently sitting here at 10-3. So we are pretty much locked and loaded into the fantasy football playoffs. And the first thing that I want to look at is clear waiver wire pivots that we should be making. And then we can get into everything else here. And let me confirm, is this a 2 quarterback format? Yes, this is a super flex league. There's no quarterbacks out there on the waiver wire. But anyway, looking at the waiver wire priority pickups. For me, I understand having Achane. Maybe you're wanting to roster the backup running back in Miami. And if there was only one running back in Miami that you'd have to roster as a backup, then sure, let's go through and let's handcuff Achane. But knowing that if Achane goes down, you're in a situation where you can't confidently say, oh, okay, well, Raheem Mostert turns into a must-start player. Or, oh, okay, Jalen Wright turns into a must-start player. And instead, you kind of assume that they go ahead and they split the backfield. For me, I think it'd probably be a very easy spot to just go ahead and to actually cut both Raheem Mostert as well as Jalen Wright. And I wouldn't feel super comfortable thinking that either guy's worth the roster spot over a couple of these names on waivers. Like for me, I would definitely prefer Isaac Guerendo. I would definitely prefer Gus Edwards. I would drop Raheem Mostert and Jalen Wright for them immediately. Going over to wide receiver potential pickups, Keenan Allen could definitely be added on if you wanted to move on from like Jordan Addison. They're in a similar range. It's up to you. I'm not going to fault you one way or another for it. For me, I'd probably rather have Addison, but I'm definitely biased. I have Addison in a ridiculous amount of underdog drafts, and I don't have much Keenan Allen. But those are the clear waiver wire pivots that I think we want to be making, is effectively just dropping the backup running backs here in Miami and getting a couple of running backs that you possibly see a little more appeal from in terms of the range of outcome for them to actually hit your starting lineup. And then going over to what we have with the starting lineup we're submitting most weeks going into the future. You have Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, obviously, as our only two quarterbacks. Both of whom are already through their bye weeks as well, so we are in a comfortable spot. You don't really need to worry about QB here. Going over to what we have at running back, we have two running back ones with Achane and Breece Hall. Obviously, Breece, very disappointing this past week, but at the same time, wouldn't be super surprised if we do end up getting a little bit of a bounce back if the knee is healthier. And then beyond this, we are just rostering the handcuffs to our own running backs, which again, I'm more okay with rostering the handcuffs for our running backs once we approach the fantasy playoffs and we're presumably pretty much through all the buys. But still, at this point, I think really deplete all our running back depth, where if Achane goes down, like I said, if Achane goes down, I'd still rather start Isaac Guerendo over these other guys. So just dropping the Mostert and Jalen Wrights of the world for these running backs off waivers, I think would be a fine play. But running back at the top, obviously, we're cruising. Wide receiver at the top, we're cruising as well. We have A.J. Brown, Jefferson, Kupp, so presumably 3 wide receiver ones rest of season. I mean, if your trade deadline had not passed, maybe you go through and do anything you can to sell either Devonta Smith or Justin Herbert in a 2-for-1 deal to go get that upgraded quarterback, or Brian Thomas and Justin Herbert in a 2-for-1 deal to go get that upgraded quarterback. Keep in mind, this is a super flex league for anybody watching. But I'm assuming your trade deadline has already passed. So in reality, you're just going to be starting A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, and then Cooper Kupp in the flex every week. And then going over to what we have at tight end, we have the tight end one in fantasy with Brock Bowers. An elite asset, obviously, could not be more excited about him. And there isn't much to discuss on that front. So it's a phenomenal team. Congrats on being 10-3. I definitely think there are a few waiver wire pivots we want to make at running back. I did hook you up with 3 free start sit questions, so feel free to send over a start sit literally every single week of the fantasy playoffs. I'd be super happy to try to help out in any way that we can. I will admit, if our trade deadline's passed and if this is the roster that we're rolling with, though, I do think start sits will be extremely simple, where you just play the quarterbacks. You play Achane, Breece at running back. You play A.J. Brown, Jefferson, Kupp at wide receiver and flex, Bowers at tight end, and we roll as is. So there's probably not too much there. But really appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. And I do want to reiterate, we sent you over those free start set questions. So please don't hesitate if you ever have anything that you want me to look at additional to this. But K-Bait coming through says, I win and I'm in the playoffs. Need a waiver wire pickup for the flex. Okay, my friend, here we have no Terry. We have no Downs. So yes, you are desperate for a waiver wire pickup. If you needed to pick somebody up to play this week, there's nobody that is better than Isaac Garindo. He is the number one priority. Again, if you have any fab dollars left for anybody watching this, you blow them all on him. You go all in. Push the chips in the middle. There's nothing left to wait for. Especially if you need to win this matchup, because if you go pick up Isaac Garindo, you'd be starting this dude this week. So that is by far and away the number one priority. Looking at the other players that people are going to be rolling with, that we just put in our wide receiver rankings, that you could possibly get on your waiver wire. If anybody drops Cedric Tillman, all memes aside, I'd pick up Tillman. I'd play him. The other guy that people are going to be going after aggressively will be Adam Thielen. For me, I'm expecting to see some serious regression in Carolina, where I'm not super excited about Thielen, to be completely honest with you. But you could go Thielen. You could go Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. I'm expecting to see some very serious touchdown regression for Ikhine, so not very excited there. And then MVS you could go with as well. But again, I'm expecting to see some pretty serious touchdown regression for MVS. So I wouldn't be super excited there either. Really, the main thing that you are looking at is push all the chips in the middle for Isaac Garindo. And if you can't get him, you can look at Adam Thielen. But again, please, if you play on Sleeper, ESPN, Yahoo, my guy, just go ahead and I'm sure your team's already linked on the site. Go to the My Teams page. That way you can see the waiver wire options in that far right column. Now, Castillo coming through with our next question. It's a start set where we need 2 flexes. We actually already picked up Garindo. We're not playing him over these other guys, I'll tell you that much. I'm going to be going with JSN and Isaiah Pacheco. I know people are going to hate us for not playing Dowdle here. Let me just confirm who we have at running back. Yeah, we can't go with anybody there. Cousins, I don't love the matchup this week to stream them, but it is what it is if you have to. But anyway, looking at what we have with, say, Rico Dowdle, while I understand he's been really good over the past 2 weeks, and this is a really strong matchup against the Bengals, who obviously have a horrendous defense and just let Najee Harris drop 26 against them. The past 2 weeks, Dallas won. They beat the Commanders and they beat the Giants. It was a clear spot to start Dowdle this past week because you actually had the Cowboys favored in that game. The Cowboys are about 4.5-point dogs here. Expectations should be that the Cincinnati Bengals win this. The Dallas Cowboys can't run the ball 20 plus times. And with that in mind, I think you should expect that the Dowdle usage does come down. And I wouldn't be nearly as excited about him as you were the past 2 weeks. But if you wanted to play Dowdle over Pacheco, I'm not going to fault you whatsoever. If you wanted to just take the productive guy and not have to take the risk on the player, obviously, that has not shown anything since his injury. And you can wait until he's productive to get him in. But LeVar Ball coming through says, must-win week. Other than quarterback, I don't know who to start. My team's loaded, to be honest. Guessing it will come down to the matchups. Team is freaking loaded here. Jahmyr Gibbs, Chase Brown over Kyron Williams. Kyron Williams, tough matchup this week. A limited receiving usage since the receivers have come back. Wide receiver, Jefferson and Mike Evans. Tight end, we're going to go Jonnu over Ingram. And then for the flex spot, we're going to go with Kyron. If you wanted to make a pivot elsewhere, it would be Drake London. If you are looking at London, this is a receiver that had 16 targets this past week. You can make an argument that they're going to have to throw the ball a bunch against Minnesota. But my concern, right or wrong, is we have seen consistent disappointment from Kirk Cousins when he has to go up against solid defenses. So I'll go with the running back that's going to see 90+% of the opportunities. But again, I could very much be wrong in this. Okay, let's move this over to our next question here. From Bank, happy to see it. As always, let me hook you up with a free start sit question, my guy. If y'all don't know, Bank is always out here with this. says, need a win to make it to the playoffs. Worried about the flex and tight end. Do we pick up Juwan Johnson for the tight end position? I think Juwan Johnson's actually an interesting pickup now that you bring it up. I probably should have had him in the waiver wire video, given the injury that you're looking at with Taysom. And obviously, at this point, just everybody is gone here in this offense. But still, there's no world I'm playing him over Dallas Goedert or Cade Otton. So honestly, I probably wouldn't. I would probably just go ahead and play Goddard if you have no Devonta Smith. If Smith plays, probably Cade Otton. And then going down to the flex spot, I think you play DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, while Hopkins hasn't been seeing the snaps, it is a game where maybe you assume that you actually don't see, I don't know, just rush attempt after rush attempt after rush attempt after rush attempt for the Kansas City Chiefs. They may end up in a spot where they are forced to go ahead and actually throw and try to keep up and play a competitive game with the Los Angeles Chargers. In that instance, maybe we see a little more DeAndre Hopkins. But, I mean, in reality, it's not a hot take. What? The only world you ever consider Lockett is if DK Metcalf misses. And then take Bigsby's the RB2 in an absolute garbage offense. I think you can drop Bigsby, to be honest. Because even if we were to have an ETN injury at this point, it probably is very, very difficult to get Bigsby in. Now, going over to CJ Dung says, obviously, Reek ranked higher, but it's a tough matchup, though. Can I pull up the amount of points the Jets have allowed to opposing wide receivers so far this season? Fantasy points allowed a wide receiver. Like, is this, to what extent are the Jets limiting opposing wide receiver ones? They're a bottom 5 team in receiving yards against opposing wide receivers. They've allowed the fewest amount of touchdowns to opposing wide receivers so far this season. And the 3rd fewest amount of points against. My thing is, if we are looking at what you have with sportsbooks, they are currently projecting out the Miami Dolphins to be a top, 4 offense in points scored this week. So I probably end up playing Tyreek to be just 100% with you. We're going to go Kenneth Walker, James Conner at running back relatively easily. Aaron Jones, you have the concerns after the fumbles, what the snap's going to look like. And yeah, I will still play Tyreek Hill. I mean, we've been saying for the past month now that Tyreek remains a must-start wide receiver. Obviously, he's not the same caliber option that he was last season or the year before. He's not the wide receiver 1 overall in fantasy. But since you've had Tua returning, he still has been viable, even if he hasn't been as good as what we would have wanted to be. Now, 55th Street Cruise coming through with a team review says 11-2. Thanks to you, King. Help me win with the 200 in the family league. Lineup recommendations, round 2 and 3. All love from Jacksonville. Really appreciate you, my guy. Here's what I'm going to do for you right now. It's going to be difficult for me to answer your start-sit questions for weeks 15, 16, 17, all in this. So I'm going to hook you up with 3 free start-sit questions. So every round, if you're still in it, you can send me a free start-sit question, and I'd be super happy to take a look at it for you, my guy. But again, definitely what I would want to do right now for you is I'll tell you I would start this week, and at the same time, any potential waiver wire pivots. So this is a 10-team, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex. The one thing that I would point out here before we get into much, is clearly this is a playoff team. This is a team where we need to be thinking about weeks 15, 16, 17. And I know it maybe sounds crazy, but Olave only has one more week where he has to be on the IR, and then potentially they could bring Olave back in. And if they brought Olave in, you have no Shaheed, you have no Taysom, you have nobody left in this offense. It'd just be Olave and Kamara. So I think on a playoff team like this, Olave actually may be a viable pickup for you, to be completely honest. But one issue is you have both Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix on bye, so you're going to have to pick up a quarterback. So looking at the best quarterback pickup, it will be Jordan Love. So let's just say, okay, what we have to do right now is we have to drop Cedric Tillman and pick up Jordan Love. And in that instance, we probably don't have the ability and the flexibility to pick up Olave. We probably don't have the flexibility even. Actually, I would still pick up Isaac Grindo. I would drop Keenan Allen for Grindo. But quarterback, I'm assuming while Bo Nix has been good, he just doesn't run the ball as much as Daniels. So if you want to make an argument, oh, Bo Nix is Rookie of the Year, you do you. I'm not going to try to make an argument for Daniels or Nix. I don't really care, to be honest. All I really care is fantasy. And they're in fantasy football terms. You just have much more rushing upside. For Daniels, I'm starting Daniels every single week in the fantasy playoffs over Bo Nix. But both are viable. I'm fine rostering both. Both have week 14 buys, so you got to pick up Love for this week. Going over to running back, I'm assuming you're starting Chase Brown and Pacheco this week, and then we can reevaluate with matchups and riding the hot hand with Pacheco and Brian Robinson in the playoffs. Wide receivers starting Chase and Pickens. We're going to go with Smith in the flex. Tight end, we're going to go with McBride. You could consider Jonnu in the flex over Smith. But yeah, again, it would be very difficult for me to answer your start set questions right this second about weeks 16 and 17. So I just hooked you up with 3 free start set questions. Don't hesitate to send those over to me again. I'd be super happy to take a look at them for you, my guy. But let's go through and let's get to our next question here. Coming out from Bank. It says, final thoughts, because if I don't win this week, I'm not making the playoffs. Bank, can you let me know in the live chat, my guy, are you past your trade deadline? Because obviously this will be a very different look at the team if we are past the trade deadline or if we are not. And let me for sure go through and hook you up with a couple more free start set questions. I know we just sent a free start set question over to you. Let me send you 2 more over just in case we are in the playoffs and we need to be looking at this team. And team name is Trying My Best. We are second in the league analyzer, so we have a really strong team. I guess maybe we just don't have a phenomenal record because we dealt with the Devon Achane and Cooper Kupp injuries, obviously Tua impacting Achane. But let's go through and let's figure out the waiver wire moves that we would first make, and then we can talk about starting lineups and potential trades if you're not past your deadline. But anyway, I think the first thing that we could say here is cut Tank Bigsby very easily. I mean, Bigsby, I have a ridiculous amount in underdog drafts, so I am really hoping that Bigsby somehow, some way, turns into a viable running back and gives us a spike week in the playoffs. It would help me out a ton. But the reality is, I mean, even if you were to get a Travis Etienne injury, Tank Bigsby's a running back that won't catch the ball in the worst offense in the league with no Lawrence. So there's no real upside here, to be completely honest. I wish I was wrong. But yeah, I'd drop Bigsby in a heartbeat. I'd go pick up Isaac Grindo. I don't see how you ever start Lockett over Cedric Tillman. At this point with the JSN emergence, I would rather have Tillman over Lockett. There's more passing volume in Cleveland as well. So I'd make those 2 swaps with the waiver wire. I'd also rather have Julian McLaughlin over Tank Bigsby if you're not able to get Grindo. But again, if you have any $5 left, I mean, you unload the clip. You go all in on Garindo. Looking at quarterback, we have the elite option with Burrow. We start every week. Tight end, we're kind of bouncing back and forth between the matchups with Cade Otton and Dallas Goedert. I don't see any tight ends that would be more interesting on the waiver wire for you here. Running back, we have Achane, Chase Brown, James Conner. James Conner has a phenomenal stretch of games for the fantasy playoffs. We have the premium handcuff back with Tyler Algier. Wide receiver, we have St. Brown, Cooper Kupp, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Lockett. What I would love to do is if you were able to pick up Isaac Garindo, maybe, and if you were past your trade deadline, sending him and DeAndre Hopkins to go get that upgraded receiver, I think that would be very advantageous. But again, I'm going to assume that you are already through that deadline. So instead, you're probably just picking up Garindo, picking up Tillman, and hoping that Amari and Kupp stay healthy. And we can throw a running back into that flex spot every single week. Because also keep in mind, Amari and Kupp are already through their buys as well. But this week, I'm going to be starting Achane, Chase Brown at running back, wide receivers St. Brown and Cooper Kupp. For the flex spot, we're going to go James Conner. Really, it just comes down to Cade Otton or Dallas Goedert in the tight end position. I mean, you have both offenses projecting to be top 5 offenses in the league this week. If you have no Devonta Smith, I'm going to be going with Dallas Goedert. If Devonta Smith does play, I will go with Cade Otton. But I hope we covered a bunch there. I hope we were able to help you out in some way. Again, I did send over a bunch of free start set questions for you, my friends. So just in case there's anything else you need help with, don't hesitate to send it over my way. But Bijan Mustard says, hey, Mason, ridiculous bye weeks. Are we going to go with Goff or Russ? Ooh. I may actually go with Goff. I mean, if you look at the spread in this game against the Packers, it is only about 4.5 points. Typically, we're used to seeing the Lions favored by like 8, 9. Maybe it's a spot where you actually have to see Jared Goff drop back and throw the ball. The over-under of this game is like 51 points. Going over to wide receiver, I think you probably easily play Judy and Harrison. It's laughable that I continue to rank Amari so high for so long. And then, yeah, you're screwed. I think you have to go Keenan Allen down here in the flex. But we have no Mixon. We have no Godwin. We have no Taysom. We have no Downs. So, yeah, you're extremely limited with the options that we have here. But, yeah, well, let's go Goff. And at least we get the entertainment on Thursday night as well. Now, shut the club down. Long-time member of the flock says, deal on the table for the 101, a.k.a. Genty. So you're trading 3 first for Genty. No, you can't do it. Do not do this. Do not do this. So I will be the first person to admit I know very little about this 2025 class. From what I have heard that this is a really bad rookie class, particularly wide receiver. It's almost the exact opposite of what we've had lately, where it seems like lately our running back rookie classes have been garbage and our rookie wide receiver classes have been great in Dynasty. But just from a flexibility perspective during the offseason, you know this better than I do, my guy. You are going to have so many potential moves available to you through the 180 days of this fantasy offseason. So I would rather not overthink it. I would rather not go, oh, Genty's the best running back prospect we've had since Bijan, yada, yada, yada. Weaker class overall. Let's sell 3 random first and let's go get Genty. No. Keep the first. You'll have better deals that come to you as the season goes on. Like, if I was selling a package of 3 2025 first at this point, I really need to be overpaid, to be honest. Now, Chargers coming through says Hubbard, Garindo, or Najee. I'm going to go Najee for sure. Quarterback, are we going to go Kyler or Darnold? I'm going to go Kyler for sure in a 4-point passing touchdown format. Darnold definitely has a better match. I mean, Darnold is a great matchup. Applied team total 25 points, favored by 4.5 points. And also, I need a tight end to pick up, must win. Somebody brought up previously the idea of going through and picking up Juwan Johnson, which I don't hate. I'd probably rather roll Gesicki if Gesicki's sitting out there on the waiver wire, just saying, oh, okay, it should be a very high-scoring game where you have an over-under over 50 points there in Cincinnati and Dallas. If anybody dropped Disley with the disappointing Herbert performance from this past week, maybe you can go ahead and pick him up. But yeah, it's not the easiest spot. Now, going over to our next question, coming out from Mavium. Massive dono. My friend, let me hook you up with a free start set. Says 6-person full PPR, included those on bye, considering dropping Cade Otton for Evan Ingram, and then Baker for Sam Darnold. I would rather have Baker over Darnold's. With Baker, I'm more excited about him now than I was previously that you have Evans back in. Obviously, he's not the same elite option that he was early in the season, but still at the same time, I think it's going to be a little bit better with Evans back in here. Going over to what we have at running back, we are looking at the combo of Walker and Connor as starts over Pacheco until we see Pacheco actually produce. And then wide receivers where this team's absolutely insane. You're going to go through and you're going to start Jefferson, Chase, Higgins. And then again, I'm assuming your trade deadline's already passed. If it hasn't, for the love of God, let's send one of these extra receivers, such as Neighbors or Wilson, with the tight end in Cade Otton to go get to an elite level tight end. But the issue with dropping Cade Otton for Evan Ingram is, well, yeah, Otton's going to be less exciting with Evans back in here, and that you will see a slightly lower target share or a significantly lower target share, depending on how you view it. To be fair, you are just in an infinitely better offense in Tampa than you are in Jacksonville, where the Bucs this week project out to be one of the best offenses in the league, whereas you actually have the Jags projecting out to be one of the worst offenses in the league. But let me refresh these questions. These are the only 2 questions that we have in the queue right now. So if you got it in a question, it should be answered pretty much immediately. But BC Caleb says, our league does not have a trade deadline, so I'm still trying to upgrade the team. I just traded Jefferson, Waddle, Thielen, Ingram. Who the hell's paying for Adam Thielen, Jalen Waddle, and Evan Ingram? For Nico, Marvin, Kittle. How I view this is you traded Justin Jefferson and I don't know, the last few Cheeto crumbs that you had in your Cheeto bag for Nico Collins, Marvin Harrison, and George Kittle. I really like the deal. The only hesitation I'd have with it is if you are looking at Nico, you still have to deal with the Week 14 bye. Thoughts on that move and any other advice from me? Thanks for the help this season. No, thank you, my guy. I will say, before I even pull up this team, it's going to be extremely difficult for me to give some solid recommendations here or say much. You are sitting with an absolute juggernaut roster. You look at the league analyzer, the top 2 teams are absolutely running away with this. The Jaden Daniels is QB2 and the Dream Team, insane in comparison to the rest of the league here in terms of total value. It is a 12-team format where you can start up to 4 receivers weekly, so depth does matter a bit more here. Options on the waiver wire will be a little bit thinner. Looking at quarterback, we have Kyler and Love that we definitely can play based off matchups going into the future. Running back, we have 2 elite names with Barkley, Kamara. We picked up Garindo as a viable depth starter. We have Tyler Algier as a premium handcuff. We have Ford as a handcuff in a bad offense. For me, I would drop Jerome Ford for Zach Charbonnet because neither of these running backs you're ever starting in the instance that the starter ahead of them is healthy. But at least with Charbonnet, we've seen that if you have no Kenneth Walker, you can very easily project him to be a running back 1 in his own offense. So for me, I would rather have Sharp, to be completely honest. Going over to what we have with the receivers, we have Nico, so a locked and loaded wide receiver 1. We have Neighbors, who I wouldn't love as my wide receiver 1 at this point based off how bad the Giants offense is, but given all the target volume, I think a very strong wide receiver 2. Harrison, very strong wide receiver 3. We have Rome as the depth piece as well with upside later in the year. We have the elite tight end with Kittle. So it's a very comfortable team. It's a very well-balanced team as well, where we're built around the studs at the very top. We can afford to deal with the Nico Collins week 14 bye because clearly this is a team with playoff aspirations. This week we start Neighbors, Harrison at receiver. We go Barkley, Kamara running back. We go Isaac Rindo in the flex. Quarterback, I personally probably end up going with Kyler Murray over Jordan Love in a 4-point passing touchdown format. Obviously, you're starting Kittle every single week, regardless of what the matchup is here. Should be a much better week this week than it was last. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I would have with this, to be completely honest with you, my guy. I think it's a really strong team for the format that you're in. Let me hook you up with a free start sit question and a free trade question. Just in case you have any other trades that come across your table, I'd be super happy to take a look at it for you. But I mean, clearly you and this other team are running away with this league. The other team has Bijan, Chase, McBride, then also London, Cup, Walker, Bucky. The only thing that you don't have to worry about is the fact that their quarterback room is just absolutely garbage, where obviously we have some viable names. And actually, we have 2 flex spots we have to start, so never mind. We're going to have to throw Rome in here as well, especially if you have to start 2 flexes. Then at that point, you are more likely than not going to be able to upgrade quarterback. I think you're chilling as is, just because the depth is going to be a little more required. And also, in a league where you can start up to 4 receivers, the quarterback production is going to make up a slightly lower percentage of your starting lineup output weekly anyway. So I think you're chilling. But I see in the chat right now, my guy, please let me know if you have any other questions with that. I'd be super happy to dive into anything else that you have. I just think you have a great team, to be honest. Now, Matt coming through with our next team says, hey, Mason, love the channel. Had a few bad breaks this season. Need a couple things to happen for me to get into the playoffs. We have a couple start-sit issues here. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's dive into this. We are 9th in the league analyzer. This is not a great spot. We are 6-7 though. So we're coming through. We're winning games somehow, some way. We're clawing into it. Okay. So we lost McCaffrey. That's why we were 6-7. And that's why we were so bottom. We were so low in this league analyzer. But anyway, starting at quarterback, we have Love and Tua, 2 quarterbacks that we can effectively just play the matchups between the rest of the season. They are very, very close to me. You can almost ignore where we have them ranked. I really like having both of these guys and effectively just pivoting back and forth depending on what the week looks like. In terms of who I would start this week, I'd probably go with Jordan Love, thinking his offense will be forced to throw the ball a little bit more than what you have in Miami. Going over to what we have at running back, we are going to be starting Breece, James Conner. I am concerned about Chuba Hubbard. I do think that's a horrible matchup going up against Philly. Not only is it a horrendous matchup going up against the Eagles, but at the same time, you do have sportsbooks projecting some serious regression here for this Carolina Panthers offense, where you do have them sitting with the lowest implied team total of any team in the NFL this week. Obviously, if we could pick up Isaac Rindo, that would be a dream. I would be willing to unload the clip. CMC is a very clear just cut. Like, no reason to hold on to this dude. If CMC is maybe sitting on our IR here and we actually wouldn't open up a roster spot by cutting CMC to pick up Grindo, then at that point, I'd be cutting Christian Watson. I'd rather cut Christian Watson than any other of the premium handcuff backs. I just don't really see how we start him here. And then say you could cut both Christian Watson and Christian McCaffrey, I would, for Isaac Rindo and Jerome Ford, or Isaac Rindo and Jaleel McLaughlin. Really, whoever you prefer between the two. Now, going over to what we have at wide receiver. We are sitting with a couple wide receiver ones in London Harrison. We have, London Evans, Harrison Thomas, rookie receivers that typically we would expect to improve as the year goes on, especially near the fantasy playoffs. The issue, of course, with Brian Thomas is his offense is just an absolute train wreck, so it's a little bit tougher to get excited there. But again, I mean, our wide receivers at the very top are good enough where I'm not particularly concerned about us going through and dropping somebody like Christian Watson. You're going to have plenty of depth to get by regardless, right? There's no world in which we're super upset about what we have starting London and Evans. I'd rather chase the high-end upside running backs for a flex. And then going over and looking at what we have at tight end, we have Andrews for the fantasy playoffs. For the Andrews bye, you have Ferguson. For me, I would prefer cutting Ferguson and maybe picking up Pat Freiermuth or Will Dissly. My thing with Ferguson is, while it's a really good matchup that you have going up against Cincinnati, and it should be a very high-scoring game, looks like CeeDee Lamb's going to be good to go. Yeah, Brandon Cooks back in this offense as well, and it's still an offense with some of the worst quarterback play in the NFL. So Ferguson, super exciting whenever you have a healthy Dak Prescott, especially when you have no Brandon Cooks, because the target volume is going to be very consistent. But when you have no Dak and when Cooks is added back into this offense, my only hesitation with saying this is it is a pretty good matchup, of course, for Ferg. But let me hook you up with some free start sit questions, just in case we make it into the playoffs and you need some additional help. But again, who I'd be starting this week is Love, Brees, Connor, London, Evans, and then I'd drop Ferg, pick up a different tight ends. Down in the flex spots, I'd be going with Harrison, and if you could pick up Isaac Rindo, obviously I don't know if you're going to be able to get him or not, then I'd be going with Isaac Rindo in the flex over Chuba Hubbard. But I think that's all I got for you. Again, I really do appreciate you and hope I was able to help you out in some way here. And let me refresh this just in case we have any more questions coming in. But we got two. That kid glowing needs a quarterback between Tua, Goff, and Love. So you actually do have the Detroit Lions, surprise, surprise, projected as a top 3 offense in the NFL this week. Only behind, I believe, the Eagles and Bengals. They are favored by about 4.5 points over Green Bay. Obviously, the amount of points that these offenses score are going to be extremely relevant for these quarterbacks. And it's a very easy way to go through and compare them because none of the quarterbacks are going to be running the ball whatsoever. Looking at what you could potentially use as I don't know. The thing with Detroit is you'd assume that they're going to be a little bit more rush heavy in comparison to what you have with both Miami as well as Green Bay. But I mean, especially with what you have for the Packers in this matchup going up against Detroit, where you can't really run the ball. We've seen in the past, if the Packers do fall behind, they're willing to ask Love to drop back 40 plus times. I think you go ahead and take Jordan Love here. It's not a super easy call, though. I think when we make the tier list for these quarterbacks, they'll probably all be in the same tier. Phoenix Lance, always happy to see you, my friend. This is Will Mason. It's crunch time. 7-6, numerous scenarios to clinch a playoff spot, win or lose. How do I best optimize my roster to make some noise? Is it worth cutting Stroud with the best options are Russ, May, and A-Rich? And do we need to hold Rome still given the wide receiver depth? We start 3 receivers in a flex. Thanks, Mace. Thank you, my guy. And again, let me hook you up with a free start sit question. Hopefully you can be back next week asking these. Hopefully we're not bounced. But anyway, we are 4th in the league analyzer here. Not super relevant because I'm assuming we're not going to be able to make too many trades at this point. Going through and pulling this up, while Evan Ingram is guaranteed, well, we'll get there. First, starting off at quarterback. Obviously, we have to do something. We can't start CJ Stroud. He's on bye, and honestly, probably wouldn't want to start CJ Stroud anyway. I mean, at this point, you kind of got to throw in the towel. I've been holding out hope. Well, maybe when you get Nico Collins back in, CJ Stroud looks better. The passing volume is improved. Well, hell, we've had Nico Collins back in for a few weeks now, and still we have not seen a 20-point performance from Stroud since September. So, quarterback, the best available guys on the waiver wire, you're looking at like Russ. The thing with May and Richardson is they have buys in week 14 as well, so it's not like they are super high priority pickups. So really the only guy you could get is Russell Wilson. Now also, with this being a little bit of a deeper league where there are limited waiver options, I wouldn't fault you if you wanted to roster 2 quarterbacks. So if you wanted to hold on to Stroud and just pick up Russ by dropping, say, Trey Benson, I wouldn't fault you for it. But going through and looking at the other moves that we need to make, I honestly think that plan A would be to drop Trey Benson, pick up Isaac Rindo, and then drop CJ Stroud and pick up Russell Wilson. With Benson, I had previously been thinking, oh, okay, premium handcuff back. If anything happens to James Conner, which, I mean, James Conner's never played a full season. Trey Benson looks very exciting. A little conflicted. I have James Conner in the Flock League, but I have Trey Benson in a lot of underdog drafts. But anyway, regardless of my team, that obviously doesn't matter. But anyway, if we are looking at what you have with Benson, I think even at this point, if you were to get that injury to James Conner, it looks like Amari DiMercato would have a role here in Arizona. So I think Benson is a player that's an easy drop. I would love to get Gurindo. I think Gurindo could almost immediately start with this team. I mean, he would be right there neck and neck with Rico Dowdle. Going over to wide receiver, we have Nico, Puka, Tyreek, and then Neighbors that we can throw in the flex spot. So wide receiver is absolutely incredible. Nico's still in the bye. If you wanted to cut Rome, I wouldn't fault you for it. But I mean, it's tough because who's more likely to your starting lineup at this point? Rome Odunze or CJ Stroud in week 15? Frankly, I just have no idea. Like CJ Stroud, even in the best matchup you could ask for, is not getting it done. If you get an injury to any of the receivers and Rome blows up, could you start him? Obviously, I'd love to say, oh, if we're not past our trade deadline, let's sell a receiver and Evan Ingram to go get that tight end upgrade, but I'm assuming we can't. So if it was my team, what I would do for sure is I would drop Benson, I'd pick up Gurindo. What it really comes down to is, do you drop Rome or do you drop Stroud for Russell Wilson? I wouldn't fault you either way. I'm not a super big Evan Ingram guy at this point just because of how bad the offense is. If you had Lawrence in, it would be a very different story because obviously every receiver here being banged up in Jacksonville is making it where Evan Ingram is just getting absolutely flooded with targets. So looking at this, I think those 2 small waiver wire pivots you can make. Also, I think you could consider dropping Rome and picking up Kincaid if it looks like you are going to have Kincaid back this week. But I hooked you up with a free start sit question. Again, thank you so much for always coming out and hanging out with us here, my guy. But a Hogan always out with us as well. Here we have no Brian Robinson this week. I think it's probably an easy call to play James Conner and Tyreek, despite the tough Tyreek matchup. Really what we have to decide between is Tracy, Pacheco, Debo, and Jacoby Myers. I know for a damn fact I'm not going with Tracy in a garbage offense. I'm not going with Debo Samuel, where the man's been non-existent. It's between Pacheco and Myers. Most people would say you go with the hot hand, you take Jacoby Myers, who has been productive so far this season. I think Myers probably has the higher floor. For me, I'm an idiot, so I'm going to think that, maybe Pacheco expands his role, getting the 9 days break from the Raiders game. And if we see Pacheco as the full starting running back here in Kansas City, then at that point, I think we can be pretty excited about a running back behind. We don't even need to get into details. I like the Chiefs offense. I like the starting running back here. I think Pacheco's a lot more explosive than Kareem Hunt is. I think you're more likely to see the big plays. But I think that should be it for the questions that we had in the live stream tonight. Obviously, you can always get your questions in and then be answered as soon as possible in the stream. And then get sent to you through the site as well. So even if you're not able to make the live stream, you still see the answer to your question. But I really appreciate y'all. Really hope that we were able to help you out in some way with this. And really hope I get to see you tomorrow night.